Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go on to chapter 2 here. So I'm going to open up Python Portable. Okay, it's enough. That's enough integers and math for now. Python is more than just a calculator. Now let's see what Python can do with text. In this chapter, we will learn how to store text and variables, combine text together, and display them on the screen. Many of our programs will use text to display our games to the player, and the player will enter text into our programs through the keyboard. We also make our first program, which greets the user with the text, "Hello World," and asks the user's name. In Python, we work with little chunks of text called strings. We can store string values inside variables, just like we can store numbers inside variables. When we type strings, we can put them in between two single quotes like this. The single quotes are only there to tell the computer where the string begins and ends, and is not part of the string value. Now, if you type spam into the shell, you will see the contents of the spam variable. Strings can have almost any character or sign in them, as well as spaces and numbers. Strings can't have single quotes inside them without using an escape character. Escape characters are described later. These are all examples of strings. We won't type this in because it's just an example here. As we did with the numerical value in the previous chapter, we can also put string values in expressions. For example, 4 times 2 plus 3 is an expression with a numerical values that will evaluate to the integer 11. String concatenation. We can add one string to another. We can add one string to the end of another by using the plus operator, which is called string concatenation. Try entering hello plus world into the shell. To keep the strings separate, put a space at the end of the hello string before the single quote like this. Okay, notice I'm going to hit the up arrow and it will give me the last thing that I typed. Strings and integers are different data types. All values have a data type. The data type of the value hello is a string. The data type of the value 5 is an integer. The data type of the data tells us and the computer what kind of data it is. Writing programs in idles file editor. Okay, now we're going to skip this section because we're not going to use the idles file editor. So we are actually going to, now we're going to go ahead and launch the Portable Python IDE. And it's the PyScripter Portable. So I guess it's the PyScripter IDE. We're just going to wait a second while that comes up. Okay, now when the PyScripter Portable comes up, it'll look something like this. Okay, yours will look something like this when it comes up. Okay, now the Python interpreter, that's going to be important because that's where our output is going to come out. Okay, this for us isn't that important right now. We can go ahead and close this over like that. I'm going to leave it a little bit open just for use later. And when PyScripter opens a new module here, what we're going to do, it will give us this kind of code at the very beginning. So we just go ahead and delete that. So we just want a blank place to type, and we want the Python interpreter open just like this. Okay, hello world. A tradition for programmers learning a new language is to make their first program display the text hello world on the screen. We will create our hello world program now. When you enter your program, don't enter the numbers at the left side of the code. They're there so we can refer to each line by number in our explanation. If you look at the bottom right corner of the file editor, it will tell you which line the cursor is on. Enter the following text into the new file editor window. We call this text the program source code because it contains the instructions that Python will follow to determine exactly how the program should behave. We're going to skip the important note and go right to typing in our program. comment at the beginning, you don't have to copy exactly, but you must comment your code. It's a very important part of programming. So get in the habit early of commenting. Notice when I put the beginning quote parentheses and beginning quotes, my IDE automatically completes. Okay, that's a great thing about working in IDE is that you know can cut your typing down quite a bit. Notice that little blue dot right there? It means there's an error. So I forgot to add the parentheses on the back of it there. Okay, and there's still an error there because I'm still typing in, right? It's not a complete correct line of code yet. Oops. Oh, my mistake. That was not what that blue dot was. Okay, so ignore the blue dot right now. Okay. Okay, so we're going to quickly once you type in your program, it's a little bit different than well, I'll go over that in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and follow along with the book. Okay, so the idle program will give different types of instructions, different colors. After you're done typing the code in the window should look like this. Notice our colors are just a little bit different, but notice how everything is color coded just like in the window here. Saving your program. Once you've entered your source code, save it so that you won't have to retype it each time we start idle. To do so, choose the File menu at the top of the File Editor window and click Save As. So we're going to do that right now. File, Save As. Now I did a sample of this before, so the way that I'm going to name mine, you would have to type this in. I'm going to name it, and I made a mistake, it's Chapter 3, helloworld.py. I'm just going to quickly delete my old one. Okay, so Chapter 3, helloworld.py, and save. It's really important to immediately save your file and opening it. In fact, I would not have waited until I typed in any code. I would go ahead and save a file as soon as you open it. That way you can just click Control S to save all the time. Okay, it should be a habit every few minutes, or not even a few minutes, every minute, or whenever it's convenient. But get in the habit of doing it often. You should save your program every once in a while as you type it. That way, if the computer crashes or you accidentally exit idle, only the typing you've done since your last save will be lost. Press Control S to save your file quickly without using the mouse at all. We're going to skip that. If you get an error that looks like this, it means you've installed the wrong version of Python. Okay, opening programs that you've saved. Okay, we're going to skip this section, and I'm just going to show you in our editor. Okay, so if when we go ahead and close this, so we already saved. I'm going to do Control S to save one last time. This is a tabbed interface. We can go down here to the helloworld.py tab and close it, and then to open another file, I would go File, Open. Again, it's a multiple document interface, so I could open many files in this same IDE. Okay, so in this case we only have one tab, but I could have many tabs. Okay, how the Hello program works. Oh, forgot. We get to run it. Okay, once I've opened it back up, we're going to go ahead and run it. Now, running files in our IDE in PyScripter is going to be a little bit different than described in the book. Okay, so how we're going to run our files is that we press this little play button right here. So we're going to hit Run, okay, or Control F9, either one. So I hit Run, and notice where our output comes out. So down in the Python interpreter it says, Hello World, what is your name? And I get this input. Okay, then that says, "It's good to meet you, Mr. Carmody." Oh, I forgot my space, didn't I? Look at that. So my space after you. So I correct it, run it again. Okay, ask my name. It's good to meet you, Mr. Carmody. Great. Okay, I'm just going to add, it's bothering me that there's no punctuation on the end, space and an exclamation point, because it's very glad to meet me. All right. Okay, there we go. It's good to meet you, Mr. Carmody! Exclamation point. How the Hello World program works. How does this program work? Well, each line that we entered is an instruction to the computer that is interpreted by Python in a way that the computer will understand. A computer program is a lot like a recipe. Do the first step first, then the second, and so on until you reach the end. Each instruction is followed in sequence, beginning with the very top of the program and working down a list of instructions. After the program executes, it's the first line of instructions that moves on and executes the second line, then the third, and so on. We call the program's following of instructions step by step the flow of execution, or just the execution for short. Now let's look at our program one line at a time to see what it's doing, beginning with line number 1. Comments. This line is called a comment. Any text following the pound sign is a comment. Comments are not for the computer, but for you, the programmer. The computer ignores them. They're used to remind you of what the program does, or to tell others who might look at your code what it is that your code is trying to do. Comments. This is my comment on comments. Comments their importance cannot be overstated. You know what you're doing right now because you're doing it. In 6 months, when you come back and look at a piece of code, you won't remember what that code is doing. It's imperative. It will save you days sometimes. So hours and hours and hours of trying to figure out what is going on in your code. Even if your code is well formed, even if it's well planned, comments are imperative. Okay. It documents your genius in the end. So take the time to do them. It's also a nice way to relax and to reflect upon your accomplishments. Okay, so functions. A function is kind of like a mini program inside your program. It contains lines of code that are executed from top to bottom. Python provides some built-in functions that we can use. The great thing about functions is that we only need to know what the function does, but not how it does it. You need not know that the print function displays text on the screen. Oh, you need to know that the print function displays text on the screen, but you don't need to know how it does it. A function call is a piece of code that tells our program to run the code inside a function. For example, your program can call the print function whenever you want to display a string of text. The print function takes the string you type in between the parentheses as input and displays the text on the screen. Because we want to display Hello World on the screen, we type the print function followed by an open parentheses, followed by Hello World, string, and a closing parentheses. The print function. This line is a call to the print function, usually written as print, parentheses. We add parentheses to the end of the function names to make it clear that we're referring to a function named print, not a variable named print. The parentheses at the end of the function let us know we're talking about a function, much like the quotes around the number 42 tell us that we're talking about the string 42 and not the integer 42. Line 3 is another print function call. This time the program displays what is your name? The input function. This line has an assignment statement with a variable my name and a function called input. When input is called, the program waits for input for the user to enter the text. The text string that the user enters, your name, becomes the function's output value. Like expressions, function calls evaluate to a single value. The value that the function call evaluates is called the return value. In this case, the return value of the input function is the string that the user typed in, their name. If the user typed in Albert, the input function call evaluates the string Albert. The function named input does not need any input, unlike the print function where we had to give it a string, which is why there is nothing in between the parentheses. On the last line, we have a print function again. This time we use the plus operator to concatenate the string. It is good to meet you, and the string stored in the my name variable, which is the name that our user input in the program. This is how we get the program to greet us by name. Ending the program. Once the program executes the last line, it stops. At this point, it is terminated or exited. All of their variables are forgotten by the computer, including the string we stored in my name. If you try running the program again with a different name like Carolyn, it will think that's your name. Remember, the computer only does exactly what you program it to do. In this, our first program, it is programmed to ask you your name, let you type in a string, and then say hello and display the string you typed. But computers are dumb. The program doesn't care if you type your name, someone else's name, or just something silly. You can type in anything you want, and the computer will treat it in the same way. And I'm not going to read this next part. Variable names. The computer doesn't care what you name your variables, but you should. Giving variable names that reflect what type of data they contain makes it easier to understand what a program does. Instead of name, we could call this variable Abraham Lincoln or name. The computer can name the computer will run the program the same, as long as you consistently use Abraham Lincoln or name. Variable names, as well as everything else in Python, are case sensitive. Case sensitive means that the same variable name in a different case is considered to be an entirely separate variable name. So spam, 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 and spam are considered to be 4 different variables in Python. They each can contain their own separate values. It's a bad idea to have differently cased variables in your program. If you store your first name in the variable name and your last name in the variable name, it would be very confusing when you read your code weeks from after you wrote it. Did name mean first and name mean last, or the other way around? If you accidentally switch the lowercase name and uppercase name variables, then your program will still run, but it will run incorrectly. This type of flaw in your code is called a bug. It's very common to accidentally make bugs in your programs while you write them. This is why it is important that the variable names you choose make sense. It also helps to capitalize variable names if they include more than one word. If you store a string in of what you had for breakfast in a variable, the variable name what I had for breakfast this morning is much easier to read than all lowercase what I had for breakfast this morning. This is a convention. That is an optional but standard way of doing things. In Python programming, although even better would be something simple like today's breakfast, capitalizing the first letter of each word in variable names makes the program more readable. Summary. Now that we have learned how to deal with text, we can start making programs that the user can run and interact with. This is important because text is the main way the user and the computer will communicate with each other. The player will enter text to the program through the keyboard with the input function, and the computer will display text on the screen with the print function when the print function is executed. Strings are just a different data type that we can use in our programs. We can use the plus operator to concatenate strings together. Using the plus operator to concatenate 2 strings together to form a new string is just like using the plus operator to add 2 integers to form a new integer, the sum. In the next chapter, we will learn about variables so that our program will remember the text and numbers that the player enters into the game. Once we have learned how to use text, numbers, and variables, we will be ready to start creating games.